Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of How to College First Gen, the show where we discuss our journeys to, through, and post college as first generation college students. I'm Amanda, your host this week, and also one of the new co hosts of the show. This week's episode is going to look a little bit different in that we do not have a guest on the show today. Since I'm new here, I thought it would be nice to introduce myself and tell you a bit about myself and my college journey. But before I jump in, I do just want to say how grateful I am to be here in this shared space and shared community with you all. So, thank you for tuning in today. All right, let's dive in. I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. If you are not familiar with where Youngstown, Ohio is located, if you draw a diagonal line from Cleveland, Ohio to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Youngstown is smack dab in the middle, right on the Ohio Pennsylvania border. Okay, moving on from our geography lesson for the day. Youngstown used to be a bustling steel mill town in the Rust Belt and really felt the effects of the steel mill decline of the 70s. And I don't mean for this to turn into a history lesson either, but I do want to share about the area I grew up in, since I think Youngstown really influenced a lot of my personal and professional interests in the community engagement and social impact space, which more on that to come. So, yeah, I grew up in Youngstown and then moved to a suburb about 10 minutes away from Youngstown where I went to a public middle school and public high school. So, a pretty small town in the Midwest. With my high school being located about 10 minutes from Youngstown State University, a lot of students within my school ended up attending Youngstown State directly after high school. Throughout the beginning of high school, when college was just starting to be talked about, I told myself that I never wanted to go to Youngstown State. I didn't know where I wanted to go, but I knew I didn't want to go to Youngstown State. Primarily, growing up 10 minutes from the institution, I was already familiar with the university, with campus and its surroundings, and I honestly just wanted something different. Being a first generation college student, prior to going on a few college visits my junior and senior year of high school, I didn't know what another college or university would be like. I had this preconceived notion that college was like what you see portrayed on TV and in the movies, and I wanted that, I'll put it in air quotes, even though you can't see, that traditional college experience. And with Youngstown State being so close to home, I knew that I might not have that same college experience that I wanted. During my college search in junior and senior year of high school, cost was a really big factor in where I chose to look. I primarily looked at all in state institutions, a couple that were in Pennsylvania, but pretty close to the Ohio border. I also did not know the difference between a private institution, a liberal arts institution, a public institution, the difference between a university and a college. I didn't know any of it. And thinking back on that time now, at that time, I didn't know I was a first generation college student. I knew that my parents didn't graduate from a 4-year institution, but I didn't think I'd ever heard of. I'm still trying to think back to it now, and I don't think I ever heard of the first gen college student terminology until much later. Youngstown State ended up being the most affordable option in comparison to other schools that I was considering. And so I decided to attend Youngstown State for undergrad. I was a commuter student for my first 2 years of college, and so I lived at home while commuting to campus every day. Living at home with my parents while commuting to campus was honestly really tough. My parents were supportive of what I was doing and supportive of me going to college and are wonderful, but I absolutely loved being on campus and being surrounded by my fellow peers. I wanted to be surrounded by my peers that were going through the same thing that I was going through. I wanted to stay on campus and be on campus for as long as I could throughout each day. As a result of wanting to stay on campus longer throughout the day, when my classes were only in the mornings and early afternoons, I decided to join student organizations and become involved on campus. I'm the type of person that wants to volunteer for everything and be involved in everything, but need to remind myself that time doesn't always allow me to do so. With classes and also a part time job off campus, and increasingly becoming involved in student organizations and on campus, I was juggling a lot. And there's a lot that I could talk about and expand upon here, but just to summarize my entire 4.5 years at Youngstown State University. First, I changed my major after my first year from forensic science to marketing management. I added on a minor and a certificate in nonprofit leadership. I became heavily involved in fraternity and sorority life and a member of Alpha Xi Delta sorority. I became involved in other student organizations that pertained to my academic area of study. I held leadership roles within my sorority and within other student organizations. I attended conferences on behalf of my student organizations. I delivered pizzas for a local pizza shop while also working on campus in our student center. I completed 2 marketing internships for local nonprofits. I participated in numerous volunteer opportunities. I moved onto campus in my 3rd year and then into a nearby apartment with a close friend for my 4th year and also for my last semester. I met some of my best friends and made some really, really amazing experiences and memories. And I also experienced a lot of doubts, a lot of tears, a lot of long nights of studying and finishing up assignments, and imposter syndrome. All to say that while being a first generation college student, I had to navigate what certain college terminology meant, where to go on campus to find the correct resources, learn that correct resources and resources were even available to me in the first place, which is why I really want to help democratize education through this platform. While in undergrad, I also pushed myself out of my comfort zone and really immersed myself in campus and academic life and met wonderful faculty and staff mentors along the way. I would highly recommend attending your school's career education office or the equivalent, or having someone help in building a resume and cover letter and go through some practice interviews. I was in the Williamson College of Business Administration at Youngstown, and I saw a counselor that helped me to form language to put on my resume. They helped me to translate my student involvement and volunteer experiences into concrete points of my resume, which helped immensely. And I actually obtained a full-time job about a month prior to graduating. So, after graduating with my Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration with a focus in marketing and a minor and certificate in nonprofit leadership from Youngstown State, this was December of 2017. Beginning of January 2018, I moved away from the Youngstown area for the first time in my life and relocated to Philadelphia. This was a big culture shock for me. Moving from a small Midwestern town to a large city like Philly, I learned a lot about myself and I grew a lot as a person. I learned a lot about other cultures and learned a lot about other people's experiences and perspectives. While I was homesick and also nervous about leaving for the first time, I was honestly more so excited and jazzed at the opportunity to experience living in a new area. My first job after undergrad was at a small college just outside of Philadelphia where I worked in annual giving. From my experiences of being a first gen college student, and I think at this time I still didn't realize I was one, and from my transformational experiences in student involvement in undergrad, I was really interested in mixing my marketing and nonprofit background with higher education. Over the course of working in that role in annual giving and in another small higher ed role, I was really interested in working directly with students and learning more about higher education. And so I ended up pursuing my Master's of Science in Education, focused in higher education, from University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education. The moment that I remember thinking, oh, I am a first generation college student, was when writing my personal statements or essays for grad school applications, which, by the way, I had no idea what I was doing on my grad school applications and no idea what I was doing on my undergrad applications. But anyway, when I was writing my grad school applications, I was writing about how I wanted to continue pursuing education and wanted to work within student affairs and student activities and work closely with underrepresented populations to help eliminate barriers to education. And that's when I began doing some research into the definition of a first generation college student. And there are many definitions out there, but that's when I realized that I was a first generation college student. So, I studied higher education at UPenn during the 2020-2021 academic year. And so while I was living in Philly, I attended school completely virtually. The grad school of education and my program really made an effort to build community among my cohort of peers. And so while virtual, I also really got to know my peers and learn a lot from them. During my graduate program, I took a class on university community partnerships. To very briefly summarize, it was about how higher education institutions interact with their local communities and even global communities. And this is where I began to formally learn about community engagement and community building and what it means and how it's put into practice. At the beginning of this episode, I mentioned that growing up in Youngstown helped to shape my interest in community engagement. Growing up within Youngstown, I saw a lot of poverty and a lack of resources. I saw a lot of abandoned and dilapidated homes, but I also saw a lot of community organizations coming together and working together with the Youngstown community to help and support and uplift the individuals and the collective community. Growing up, I didn't know what I was seeing, nor did I have the vocabulary to express what I was seeing. When studying nonprofit in undergrad and interning at a couple nonprofit organizations in Youngstown, I started to gain an understanding and gain the vocabulary of the impact and of the work that I was seeing, the work of community building and community engagement. However, it wasn't until my time in grad school where I learned about intersectionality. And let me just say, grad school really opened and expanded my way of thinking. And it was at this time where I really started to understand just how so many things intersect with one another. For example, how so many fields of study overlap. And I really just touched the surface at how complex society is. I know I may be rambling a bit here, but to wrap all of this up, I think where I am today has really been influenced by my observations growing up, by my experiences as a first gen student, by my involvement in undergrad, by my experiences moving away from my small town, by my grad school educational experiences, and by amazing, influential, and diverse people and perspectives that I've had the pleasure of meeting in every phase of my life so far. And so at the time of this recording, I'm back living in a small community outside of Youngstown with my husband and my two cats, our two cats, in our first home that we've purchased. I work remotely from home in a community engagement role for an amazing organization called Nest, an organization that works with artisans and handmakers around the globe, most of whom are women, to advance gender equity and economic opportunity through craft, which working remotely in a community engagement role is also a really interesting perspective in that community engagement can be in person, but it can also be done virtually as well. And I am very, very honored to be one of the new co hosts of this show. I think a through line throughout my personal and professional interest has really been to break down barriers to education, whether that's high school education, formal higher education, education to help grow small businesses, education to work within a trade. Any type of education is powerful and transformative. I'm a believer of lifelong learning, and I also have a deep interest and passion for uplifting others' voices and stories. And I'm so happy to be able to share your first gen stories and share others' first gen stories with all of you. Well, that is a wrap from me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm very much looking forward to being on this journey with you and connecting with you. Have a great week.